There. We are starting a new series today and called Hope in the Dark, and I am really looking forward to this series, and I feel it is just right for us as a church at the moment. I feel the timing is right to be looking at this because we're going to start looking at the question, where are you, God? And that might be relevant to quite a few of us in the room at the moment. Where are you, God? And we're going to be looking at the book of Habakkuk, or as a lot of the Americans I seem to listen to with their preaching, they pronounce it Habakkuk, which is a little bit different, but that's okay. I'm not sure who's right, although I will say that they speak English, not American, so the English are always right. You've got an American here, haven't I? So I thought I'd make that point just for you. You're welcome. So I'm going to call him Habakkuk. You can call him whatever you want, just for an intro. And you can all, if you've got a Bible with you, you can try and find him now. He's quite hard to find in the Bible. He's probably not been someone you've heard preached on an awful lot. I like finding some of the books in the Bible that we don't often look at and just trying to see what we can figure out about and just listen to and hear what God has to say through them. He's one of the minor prophets. So there are 12 of them in the Bible. I love the prophets. I think they're brilliant because often their language we don't get a lot of the time. They talk in pictures. It's all very different. And this is one, as I say, that's only 3 chapters long. It's not very big. And we're going to spend sort of November looking at this book together. We don't have a lot of information on him as a prophet. But what we do know about a prophet is prophets are often people who speak to people on behalf of God. But one of the real interesting things about this book, about this prophet in Habakkuk, he is actually speaking to God on behalf of the people. It seems to be the other way round what he is doing here. And it was a really interesting time that he was around in, roughly 600 years before Jesus came around. This man is speaking, and it comes at a time where the nation of Judah is in downhill. You know, they had been prosperous, things have been going well, but all of a sudden the nation he comes and starts speaking to starts to become impoverished. There starts to be injustice, corruption, violence. All these things start coming into the world that they know about. And so people like him, like Habakkuk, and the people around, they are confused. They're perplexed, they're baffled, they don't know what's going on. They're disappointed, they're angry, they're almost like, God, why are you allowing this to happen? Which might be a question for some of you sat here today. God, why are you allowing this to happen? You could stop it. He just doesn't seem to do it. And Habakkuk doesn't ease this message. This is not a book where a book of the Bible, this prophet, he's not going to butter God up in some way. He's not going to paint God in a way as if like it's no problem, it's all going to be fine. He's upset and he doesn't hold back. You know, and I say that question is one that was not only being asked 2,600 years ago, we're still asking it today. Why doesn't God seem fair? We're still asking that question. And I just thought this book will be one which is really helpful for us as a church to work our way through at this time. God, why are you not fair? So I'm just going to read out initially. I'm not going to read verse 1. He just talks about it being, it's a vision, a prophecy. Interestingly as well, the word that they use there for prophecy, the actual meaning of it is like an utterance, a burden, or a doom that the prophet is bringing, which sets you off on a really good tone, doesn't it? A doom that is being brought. And listen to this. This is what we read in verse 2 and verse 3. How long, Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen? Or cry out to you violence, but you do not save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Some of us, that could almost probably be the story of our life sometimes, can't it? That could almost be our prayer. How long, Lord? You just don't seem to be listening, but I'm crying out, how long? God, why aren't you doing something? Can you not see it? Habakkuk doesn't get it in one sense. He knows God can intervene, but God doesn't seem to be intervening. And we've got to appreciate his brutal honesty. How often have I said it? Have others said it? We come and almost like you hear a message, and at the end of it, we've got a perfect answer to sort of all life's problems. But here we find the reality of life hitting. We feel brutal honesty coming through from Habakkuk that we can really identify with. And even his name tells a story. His name, Habakkuk, means to embrace or to wrestle. And that is exactly what is happening as we look at this book. He is trying to embrace and wrestle with what is going on. But like I said, this sermon series, it has a bit of a warning. I'm giving you a warning right now. This isn't a sitcom sermon. I say sometimes, a lot of us have watched sitcoms before. My generation, we grew up watching Friends. I don't know what your generation grew up watching, what sitcoms they were. But often in a sitcom, what tends to happen is the characters are around, then there's a problem, and within 30 minutes, including your commercial breaks, the problem's been solved at the end of it. That's how a sitcom often works. Where there's a problem, but don't worry, we'll solve it. But life isn't like a sitcom. And this sermon is not going to be like a sitcom. I can't pretend to give you all easy answers. Because what happens in a sitcom is something like this. Someone, the character, whoever it might be, they like their job, they enjoy what they're doing, but then they lose their job. And in the middle of this sitcom, probably in the middle of the commercial break, they get a better job. And at the end of the better job comes with benefits. They end up with better work colleagues, they get better pay, and everything like that. That's what a sitcom looks like. But life isn't a sitcom. Because this is what real life looks like. Real life looks more like this. You like your job, but then you lose your job. And then you don't get a better job. You might end up in debt. And you might end up considering yourself a failure. That's what life looks like. Or like this. Sometimes you love your spouse. Your spouse cheats. They don't apologize. The blame game starts. And someone leaves. Or just very relevant for a number of us, you like life. You enjoy life. But then you get a bad doctor's report. And you pray, and you pray, and you pray. And you fight against what it is, and it goes away. But then 6 months later, it comes back again. That sounds much more like life, doesn't it? And sometimes in the middle of that battle, if you come to a church, you sometimes get these people who are well-meaning Christians, really well-meaning. They mean the best. They want to help you, and you're in the middle of the battle where you just seem to. I'm struggling to even get up today, and they just come at you, go, "Don't worry, God's got this. He's in control. Just let go and let God. He's got it all." They're technically not wrong. But you're sat there going, "Well, my faith is rattled. I'm spiritually shaken. I do not know what to do with this. I feel like my whole world is just caving in on me." And we end up in the same place as Habakkuk. Why are you letting it happen? Why aren't you doing anything, God? It is not fair. And life seems like that. There are so many things in life. People, we just don't get this. Life is not fair. I've known people who can't conceive. They pray, they trust God. And yet there are people around them who don't even want kids who are having kids. Life doesn't seem fair, does it? There are people who are faithful in following Jesus. They read their Bible, they pray, they serve, and yet they're still battling depression and difficulties in their life. Why is it? It doesn't seem fair. I'm doing the right things. There's suffering in the world. There's starving babies, there's racism, there's terrorism. It's around us everywhere. It doesn't seem fair. And then we read this in Habakkuk, verses 3 and 4, carrying on verse 3 and verse 4. Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflict abounds. Therefore, the law is paralyzed and justice never prevails. I told you it's not a sitcom sermon today. See, Habakkuk has problems with God. And these are his problems with God that he seems to have right now. Firstly, his problem is, you don't seem to really care, God. Do you not see the injustice? Do you not see the suffering? You don't seem to care. Second problem with God is almost like, God, you aren't doing much when you could. I know you have all the resources of heaven and you could solve that in an instant. Why don't you solve it? Why don't you do something about it? And thirdly, his problem is, well, what you are doing doesn't seem fair. You know, and then we all end up in this place. And if I was to ask for a show of hands here, I reckon a lot of you put your hands up. If you've ever been in a problem like this is rhetorical, I don't need to see your hand. How many of you have tried to play God? Well, if I were you, I'd do things differently. You ever felt like that? God, if that was me in your place, I wouldn't let that happen right now. I'd have dealt with that. And the reality is, we come to this problem and go, well, is it ever okay to question God? And I'm going to say, yes, it is. Habakkuk questions God. It is absolutely okay to question God. In fact, if you read lots of other parts of your Bible, a third of the Psalms are prayers and songs of people hurting. People hurting. The Bible isn't a book of, it's all just happy, clappy, and everything's fine, and, you know, become a Christian and all your problems go away. If that's the Christianity you've been sold, I'm sorry. And actually, if you read other books such as Job, Lamentations, Ecclesiastes, and even Jeremiah, they express confusion and pain of unbearable suffering for people who follow God. Even Jesus himself asked God, why? If Jesus is asking God why, how much more do we in the pain of life need to ask God why? You see, what tends to happen in life is life doesn't seem to go along on a plateau. Life has its ups and downs. And so does the Christian life, but we don't often talk about it loads. What tends to happen is you start off sort of before you know God down here, and then you meet with God and have almost a mountaintop experience. And in this mountaintop experience, you tend to think everything is going right for you. Oh, the church is wonderful. Everything they say and I'm agreeing with. I love the songs. Life is perfect. Everywhere I go, God, you are answering my prayers. I prayed last night that they would still have chocolate on offer in the supermarket, and it was still on offer. Life is perfect. You're on this mountaintop. Okay? But then what happens is over a bit of time, you realize, oh, hang on, life has got some challenges. And from this mountaintop, you start to come down a bit the other side as some of the difficulties in life come and get in the way. And some point on that coming down the other side, what happens is somewhere along the lines, you have a crisis of belief. Because it's easy to believe in God when you're on a mountaintop and everything seems great. And he seems to be answering all your prayers and you're getting all the answers you want. Everything seems great. But as soon as you start coming down the mountain the other side, we end up with this crisis of belief. And you might think, well, I'm there now. You might think, I've been there in the past. You might think, oh no, is it coming? But you have options when you hit this crisis of belief. Different people respond in different ways. Some people, when they hit this crisis of belief on the way down, they'll deny there are problems there. There's nothing wrong, it's okay, I'll just kind of carry on. Suppress everything, ignore it. Some people, at that point, give up on their faith. Go right back to the beginning of the original mountain. God can't be real because I have problems. Go right back to the beginning. deny it, give up. But actually, the strongest people in faith, and this is what I want to encourage us to do, and this is what we're going to see Habakkuk doing, are those people that somehow try and embrace the difficulty and wrestle with it. Just like his name means. They embrace and they wrestle. And what tends to happen is if you've gone over this mountaintop and you have this crisis of belief, does life get instantly better when you start embracing and wrestling? No. Often it still keeps going down and down and down. It seems to go down almost further than where you started, where you almost end up in a valley. But you know what? The Bible is very clear that though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. That when you're in the valley, God is still there. That when you're in the lowest of the low, he is still there. And in fact, what then tends to happen is what we read in James 1, where it says this: "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds, as you are coming down the other side, if you have your crisis of belief, as you are in that valley, when you are facing trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." So what is happening as you are in that valley, in that moment where you could have given up, God is actually producing something bigger for you to come out the other side. He is producing perseverance. And you need to do that so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking in anything. Real followers of Jesus need to go through the valleys in life. They need to embrace and need to wrestle and come out the other side. Life isn't going to be easy. See, Habakkuk is wrestling and embracing. He's questioning. And it's fascinating what then happens. Because as Habakkuk is questioning God and what is going on, listen to God's response in verse 5. Just look at the nations and watch and be utterly amazed. For I'm going to do something in your days that you would not believe, even if you were told. See, God is turning around to him and going, don't worry. You may be in the valley. You may think it is terrible, but I am going to amaze you. Just wait. I'm not finished. Just wait. But then this is where, once again, I think a lot of us tend to give up. Because God doesn't answer in the way we want him to answer. This is how God tells him he's going to do something amazing. He tells him in verse 6, I am raising up the Babylonians. They are the enemies. He is raising up the enemies of the people. And that is what God is doing. And not only that, let's carry on reading, that ruthless and impetuous people who sweep across the whole earth to seize dwellings not their own. And then a bit from verse 7 and a bit from verse 9. They are a feared and dreaded people. They all come intent on violence. It makes no sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. It seems not fair. It doesn't seem right. God, what are you doing? What do you do when you feel like you're in this place? God, I'm wrestling. But yet you seem to be raising up my enemies around me. I don't get it. You see, a follower of Jesus can both wrestle with honest questions and embrace a genuine faith in God, even if they do not understand what is happening. In fact, Habakkuk does it. Look at verses 12 and 13. Lord, are you not from everlasting? I'm going to embrace you, but I'm also kind of questioning you. My God, my Holy One, I'm embracing. You're the God, you're the Holy One. You're never going to die. I'm embracing you. You, Lord, have appointed them to execute judgment. I'm embracing what you're doing. You're my rock, have ordained them to punish. I'm embracing you and who you are. Your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrongdoing. I'm embracing you, can't tolerate it. But now I'm going to wrestle. Why then do you tolerate the treacherous? Why are you silent while the wicked swallow up those more righteous than themselves? I'm going to embrace God. You're the rock. You're the Holy One. But I'm going to wrestle. God, I don't understand. Why are you doing this? Why am I having to go through this? Why is life so hard? Why? So can you see? The Bible speaks very really, in a very real way to us. And if this is you today, if you're in that place where you're in pain, you're hurting, you feel like you're in the dark, I want you to know that God understands your pain, but he also welcomes your questions. And I reckon he would rather have you yell at him than walk away from him as you are going through difficulties. You know, you might have hit the wall. You might be in the biggest crisis you've ever been in. You might feel you're in a trial that is never ending. You're carrying a burden you just cannot manage. But let me tell you this, don't deny your doubts. Rather, let your doubts drive you to God. Don't deny them, but let them drive you to him. If you're coming down in that crisis of belief, don't walk away from him. Don't give up. Here's a quote from a man called Craig Groeschel. It's this. He says, "What if honestly acknowledging your doubts is the first step toward building a deeper faith? What if embracing your secret questions opens the door for a maturing knowledge of God's character? What if becoming closer to God, developing genuine intimacy with him, requires you to bear that which feels unbearable? To hear him through an ominous utterance, to trust him in the moment of doom, to embrace his strength when you're weak with a burden? What if it takes real pain to experience deep and abiding hope? What if?" Habakkuk, he's wrestling and he's trying to embrace. He's trying to take all this on. It's hard. It's not easy. He's crying out to God, why? Life does not seem fair. God, I'm doing all the right things. But that's because it's not about you. It's about him. He is the one over all. We've created a world now where we think we're Lord over our own life. There will come a day when you realize you're not. When your health starts failing or your money runs out, you'll realize you're not Lord of the earth. We need to start learning what it is to wrestle and embrace at the same time. And like I said earlier, this isn't a sitcom sermon. I'm going to be honest with you today. I'm not going to finish with a happy ending. I'm not. Because life is not a sitcom. Life has its difficulties. You know, sometimes people will say something to you, things like this, or you might have heard this before. I might have even said it. God will never give you more than you can bear or handle. No, he actually says, I will not let you be tempted. He often allows you to bear more because it drives you to him. It drives you to depend on him. Often the reason behind our pain, the reason behind our trials and our wrestling is to drive you to him. So if you feel like you're going into a valley right now, that's not a bad place to be. It might hurt. It may suck. It may feel like your life is ending. But let me tell you what. You can come out the other side of that valley with a deeper love and understanding and abiding in him. We have got to learn to be people who wrestle and embrace with him. You know, I can't stand here today and say, is life going to get better? It may not. It may get worse. I can't lie to you. I can't. Sometimes life is left hanging. You know what? Life is not a sitcom. It's not. And we're just in chapter 1 of Habakkuk right now. And in chapter 1, this might be where you feel like you're in life right now. There is no answer. There is no resolution. There's no miracle. There's no solution. That might be where your life feels right now. But today is one of those days where we're going to be real with each other. That's okay. And if I'm being even more honest, chapter 2 is not much better. But don't worry, chapter 3 is coming. But the problem is, in life, so many people walk away from God in chapter 1 of their life when stuff gets a little bit tough, because they've been sold a Christianity which is God answers everything you want when you want it, in your way. That is not life. And that is not the Christianity that Jesus established. But when we're in chapter 1, what we have to start doing and learning to do, and I'm not trying to make out this is easy at all, we have to start learning how to wrestle and embrace. How do I embrace the truth of God while I'm wrestling with whatever war is raging in my life? That's hard. But that's why we need church. That's why we need people around us. That's why we need people who can be with us and lift us up and pray with us. That's why we need each other. You know, so often the people who do give up are those that end up start fading away from church. Whereas we need each other. We need to be a church where when one person hurts, we all hurt. When one person celebrates, we all celebrate. We need to be with each other through the difficult moments as well as the good moments. Because life is not a sitcom. We need to be the kind of church that doesn't deny our doubts, but lets our doubts drive us to God. Who's willing to question through the tears. Who's willing to wrestle and embrace. And so what I want to do now is, I want to do that. I'm going to ask some people to be brave. If you are wrestling right now, in a moment, I'd love to get some people praying for you. Because I think we need to wrestle together. We need to take stuff on. If you are wrestling and if you are comfortable in a moment, I'd love you to put your hand up in a moment. And I'd love to get some people around you to pray for you. Because this is what church does. This is who the church is. We're a church that goes, life sometimes sucks. And that's okay. We need to learn to wrestle through that together.